Allow me to introduce you to the deepest position on the Sun Devils defense, safety.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast, and stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our position breakdown series. We are talking about safety today, and I got news for you. This is the deepest position group on defense and one of the deepest position groups on the roster entirely. For me, the only position that rivals safety is running back, and running back has a plethora of guys who can start. So does safety. In fact, safety was already a strength for the Sun Devils heading into the year, but then they added more players. And it's gotten to a point where you wonder how everything's going to shake out, because it's like you can't get all these guys on the field at the same time. But in the same token, it's like, how do you not get these guys on the field? How can you justify keeping these amount of guys on the sideline and not getting them good amount of snaps and good amount of reps and all that good stuff? Because when you have the surreal talent that ASU has, you can't justify keeping these guys off the field. Now, at the same time, I'm not saying like roll out 5 safeties on defense. Like, that's not feasible. But at the same time, you should have 3 guys out there consistently, I would say. You should have 1 or 2 guys that can play the slot and rotate in, and it'll help the corners room as well. Like, you take a guy like Shamari Simmons and you allow him to play in the nickel. Well, this is going to give Cole Martin, the starting nickel, an opportunity to go outside, or you can just get more creative and just find new ways to get guys on the football field. It's also really good from a rotational standpoint. You have Shamari Simmons out there. You have Xavion Alford out there. Well, take them off the field, give them a couple plays to relax, and throw out Kamari Wilson and throw out Macen Williams and Myles Ghost Rouser and Montana Warren. You've got such a deep room, and that is such a great problem to have for Arizona State. Is you've got 6 safeties for me. All of them should get pretty good playing time. Even the guy that you would perceive as like last on the depth chart is still more than quality, whoever that might be. And we'll get into my depth chart, of course, but I want to talk about what makes up this depth. We can start with the returners. Shamari Simmons, leading tackler from a year ago, somebody who had production previously when he was at Austin Peay prior to transferring to ASU last year. I look at Simmons as kind of like a how do you keep him off the field player, especially because he's got the versatility to come down in the box or play the nickel. Having that ability to just line up in multiple different ways for the defense for Arizona State is going to go a long ways in making sure that he's just on the field in some capacity. You really like what you have with Shamari Simmons. But then next to him will be Xavion Alford. Welcome back, Mr. Alford, friend of the podcast, Xavion Alford, who last year was ruled ineligible by the NCAA. Unfortunately, due to their 2-time transfer policy, he is back. He is 100%. He's good to go, and he's going to be a playmaker. Alford was somebody that we were anticipating to be kind of a ball hawking safety for Arizona State. and allow some of their other guys to roam around a little bit more, because you were going to have Alford so deep in playing center field that quarterbacks weren't going to be willing to throw his way. Unfortunately, that was not meant to be, as he was ruled ineligible. He's back, and he's going to be a factor. To me, Alford is somebody who would have been a starting safety last year for Arizona State. So he's going to go into training camp probably with a opportunity in front of him to be the starting safety. I don't want to say it's his job to lose, but that's kind of the way you're trending with it. Is you look at the talent level of this kid, right? You look at everything that he can put together and give you from a playing standpoint. Somebody who's got the ball hawking skills to record multiple interceptions or just find his way to the football. That kind of player is worth its weight in gold. You want him on the field. But ASU wasn't just satisfied with Simmons and Alford coming back, who probably would have been your starting two safeties before they continue to add guys through the transfer portal. They added Ghost Rouser and they added Kamari Wilson. Wilson, a former four-star player, transferred to Arizona State. He did not get the playing time he was looking for at Florida. He's coming to Arizona State, and look, he's not going to be promised any playing time here either. And it's a deep room. There's no guarantees for any of these guys, whether that's Simmons or Wilson or Alfred or anybody else. But it's going to be a wide open competition. And there's no reason that a guy as talented as Kamari Wilson can't find his way onto the football field. And I think that's something really important to note as well with him is this is a player that is so otherworldly talented that you feel like there's just something there for him to turn into a stud. Not only is he a former four-star kid, this is a high four-star kid, almost a five-star talent. It's there. It is absolutely there for Kamari Wilson to turn into a stud, turn into a beast for Arizona State. The untapped potential of this kid. If Brian Carrington and Brian Ward can get their hands on him and just find a way to morph him into the potential he has and into the superstar that he could become, you're going to have a hard time keeping him off the field. Ghost Rouser, this is someone I mentioned the other day when we talked about linebackers, is him and Keyshawn Elliott. Keyshawn Elliott are both coming from New Mexico State, and they're both hyper-productive kids, and Rouser was someone who was also able to be kind of that center fielder for the team. I like what he brings, and if nothing else, I love that he brings a veteran aspect to this team. This is a player that I think is going to be such a good voice in the locker room for you, and having a guy like that is really going to help the development of some of the younger guys. Like you take a look at Kamari Wilson, who we just mentioned. Well, he's kind of been stash developed behind the scenes. Is he ready to take on a bigger role? That could potentially be the case, but he's going to need guys ahead of him to continue building him up and developing him and seasoning him. Rouser could be that guy. Rouser could be a guy for some of the younger kids too. Not just the safeties, but he might be able to help out with the corners. But this is also a player that I think you just get on the football field. He's a center fielder guy. He's someone that can make plays on the football. He's also a sure tackler. That is also typically a pretty good thing to have on your defense. Macen Williams is back. He's another veteran for the team. He's kind of been there, done that at corner and safety. He's going to be key depth. The last guy I want to mention before we head into the depth chart, if you listen to this podcast, you know who I'm talking about. Montana Warren. Now, Warren was a former three-star out of Texas, and I've said this many times. You're a three-star in Texas, you're a four-star in just about every other state. This kid is otherworldly talented. Last year during training camp, he flew around the field. He played in the slot. He played near the line of scrimmage. He played outside. They just put him in and let him do his thing. And more often than not, wherever the ball ended up being, Montana Warren was right there. He just finds the football. He's got the instincts. And he's got I kind of teeter here. I'll say it, but I'm not 100% sold on it just yet. He might be the most talented safety on this team. He's so far ahead of where you would expect him to be. And unfortunately, we missed him last year due to a leg injury. He is a redshirt freshman, and he's got a year to learn the system. We'll see if he's 100% good to go. He looked good in spring ball. Let's see if he can put everything together now. Very, very excited for Montana Warren. I'm just excited for this safety depth chart, period. There's so many different players and different buttons that these guys push. They're studs. You can rotate them in any order that you would like to be starters, but we are going to try and put it in my own order. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Passion, drive, patience, the winning formula for winning championships, and also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Shout out to you guys for making us your first listen of the day. I appreciate you guys as always. And of course, I especially appreciate my everydayers. But make sure that you check out the Locked On 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and the free Amazon Fire TV channels app as we keep you up to date with the biggest news in sports without the yelling and screaming that you're going to get from other networks. Back into our conversation now, we're going to take a look at a potential depth chart for this Sun Devils secondary. Now, the way I have it laid out is I did not do strong safety and free safety. I just have safety 1, safety 2. So starting 2 safeties, I don't care where you put them, because I think that the vast majority of these guys can do a little bit of everything. I think that you do have very strong tackling safeties here. I think that you've got guys who can play deep. I think you got a little bit of everything with these guys. Some of them are better in certain areas than others, but as a whole, these safeties are going to be able to be borderline interchangeable for you. Now, I did do safety 1, safety 2, and I included nickel as well. And the reason I included nickel is this is a depth chart that, like I said, you're going to have a hard time keeping all of these guys off the field. You're going to want to find a way to get them on there. The best way to do that is 3 safety sets where one of them lines up in the nickel in the slot. We're going to talk about that. But first, safety 1, until further notice, I feel like it just has to be Shamari Simmons. He's the guy who's coming back with all of the playtime experience. None of these guys got on the field very much last year, aside from Macen Williams, who was a rotation player last year. Xavion Alford missed last year. Montana Warren missed last year. Kamari Wilson and Ghost Rouser are transfers. Simmons has the playing time. Simmons has the command of the defense, and Simmons is aware of the expectations and the role that he plays in this defense under Brian Ward. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this for me. I think this is very black and white. Could he be usurped? Of course he could. But it's going to be up to him for losing that role. And I just don't foresee that happening. He is a good football player. He's somebody that is really going to be leaned upon this year as a veteran and as a leader of the defense. Not just the secondary, not just safeties, but all 11 guys and everyone on the sideline. Simmons is going to need to be one of the voices of that room, one of the voices of that defense. There's a lot of pressure here on Shamari Simmons, and I think that he's up to the challenge, but I'm just having a hard time imagining anybody else being safety one. Shamari Simmons, safety one. Safety two, I actually had to think about this one a little bit. I ended up going with a little bit of white bread with Xavion Alford because he's a beast. He's a stud. He might be the guy who's closest to breaking out. I know that there's some really talented kids like Montana Warren and Kamari Wilson, who I mentioned. I think Alford is closer to a breakout than those two are to a breakout, and he's just got ball hawking skills to him. He's safety two for me. Really, after safety one, I think it's wide open. I think any of these guys could end up becoming the number two safety on this team. And who knows? Maybe they could, like I said, maybe they could usurp Shamari Simmons of that role. But for right now, I am rolling with Alford. I will tell you the guy that I flirted with instead of Alford was Kamari Wilson. He's just so talented. Guys like Kamari Wilson are so rare to come by. You get him on your team, there's little that's going to stop him from becoming a beast. It's just him. But if Kamari Wilson is dialed in, then he's a stud. But I am going Alford for right now. He does have a year under the system. Now it's a matter of implementing it on the field. Nickel. So I will tell you my starting nickel is Shamari Simmons. And with that caveat, that's where I would have Kamari Wilson be the next safety across from Alford. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to list Simmons twice. So I went with Montana Warren. And that might surprise some people. To me, it would be Warren or it would be Macen Williams. I'm leaning with Montana Warren because I look at the amount of talent that he has showed off, and more than anything, he's got a lot of snaps from training camp, from spring ball, playing inside and near the line of scrimmage. That kind of comfortability that Warren could potentially have is what's causing me to lean more towards him as the starting nickel guy. And of course, there's an opportunity for Rouser and Wilson and Williams to prove their worth and capability to also be nickel guys and start ahead of Montana Warren. There's absolutely that possibility. But for right now, based off what I've seen, based off the way I feel, I just think that Warren makes the most sense for nickel if Shamari Simmons is playing deep. So if Simmons is lining up as a true safety, in my opinion, it's Montana Warren or it's Macen Williams. If Simmons plays if Simmons is not playing like a true safety spot deep, then he's the nickel guy. It's going to be difficult to take Shamari Simmons off the field. So he can either go from top safety or down to top nickel. That's where I stand with Shamari Simmons. But in a spot where he is the top safety, for me, it's Montana Warren. I would also consider Macen Williams. And of course, you got to look at Wilson and Rouser too. It's not like they're totally out of this, or any other defensive back who's going to get some safety reps. The best of the rest, Kamari Wilson is the next guy for me. He would be at the very top of the rotation if they decided to rotate their safeties in and out. He's just so talented. If he's able to live up to his billing, ASU's got something special. Next, I got Ghost Rouser. He's got the production. He's a good tackler. I'm ready to see the interceptions pile up, but I do think that this is still a guy who just finds his way to the football. And then Macen Williams is the last guy for me. But like I said at the top of the show, and I'll reiterate right now, I think these guys could all be starters and have their own different ways of making an impact on the field. Macen Williams, a veteran of the team. He's been here for a minute. He's got corner experience. He's got safety experience. He's one of those players that just brings a little bit of everything to the table. And sure, he may not be a starter, but in a pinch, you're very, very comfortable going to Macen Williams. And even not in a pinch, you're going to get him on the field. He's more than capable of doing a little bit of everything for you. Those guys are valuable in more ways than one. Macen Williams absolutely going to find himself on the field. I just have him lower on my depth chart, if for no other reason than some of these guys just feel like the sky's the limit. Like the ceiling is just so otherworldly for some of these kids. But we're going to wrap up the show now like we have done with the upside and the downside of the unit. There's definitely some big time potential here. We're going to hop into it in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Stay in touch with that content by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Wrapping this bad boy up with the upside and the downside, the highest potential, the lowest downside, whatever you want to call it, ceiling and floor, a little bit of everything. The best case scenario here, absolute best case. I'm not even going to say like it's a great unit, which that is part of the upside, but the biggest upside, you have a superstar in this unit. I think the only other position I said this for was running back. You could have an all-conference player back there. I mean that in my heart of hearts. There are so many different players in this safety room that could really just turn into beasts, man. I'm talking tackling machines, turnover guys, just really good players in zone or run defense or blitzing or whatever. Maybe everything. There's more than one guy here that can turn into one of the best players on this defense. I think the easiest guy to highlight is probably Kamari Wilson, but obviously I'm a big fan of Montana Warren too. And the rest of the guys are all just as talented. But if you ask me, like, hey, who do you think is the biggest breakout on this defense? Like I said, I think Alford is the closest to a breakout. In terms of highest ceiling, I would go Kamari Wilson. Montana Warren's not far behind. Would not surprise me if any of those three had such a good season that they end up being all conference players, whether it's first team, second team, or honorable mention. There are guys here that look like they're ready. And if they realize their potential, they're beasts. And I mean, that's another upside here is someone realizes their potential. I have in my notes specifically that Montana Warren realizes his potential, but I mean, come on, man. How many times do I have to say Kamari Wilson is otherworldly talented? He's got that upside too. The other thing I want to mention that I already hinted at before was having a secondary that does a little bit of everything for you. We talked on Monday about the corner position and how I think that you've got several guys who can start outside, guys who can potentially bring some ball hawking skills for you, guys who can play inside, outside. I think that there's the potential there for safety too. You have 6 guys, maybe more than that, depending on how the lineups get shuffled around. But you have 6 players here who could all find significant time on the playing field, and guys who bring certain attributes to the field. Just an example, like Xavion Alford has ball hawking skills. Ghost Rouser, quality tackler. Shamari Simmons, Mr. Do-It-All. Montana Warren can play inside as a slot guy. You have those guys play off of each other. You're able to get them all on the field. You don't feel like you're forced to have Shamari Simmons playing 90% of the snaps. Maybe you can have him reduced a little bit because you can get Ghost Rouser out there, because you can get Kamari Wilson and Macen Williams an opportunity to play. You get Shamari Simmons to play more nickel because that's how good you are at safety with, I don't know, Xavion Alford and Ghost Rouser. That's how good you are. That's how good those two are, that Shamari Simmons becomes a nickel guy with Cole Martin, and you just find ways to get them on the field. That is the highest potential here. And I think that this safety room is one of the highest potential rooms on the team. Like I said, I think in terms of talent, the only other position that would be as talented or more talented is running back. Now, the downside, I don't see too many. The one thing I have noted here is like too many chefs in the kitchen. Like, you may have such a cluttered room that you just aren't able to get guys out there. And this has been a few positions that I've mentioned as too many chefs in the kitchen. This isn't the first position I've mentioned that for. It's not a bad thing to have this many talented players. It's not even a bad thing to just find ways to rotate them in. You just may not realize the highest potential because somebody like Shamari Simmons isn't getting a ton of snaps. And because of that, maybe you're missing out on opportunities for him to turn out some big plays, which leads me to my last point for downside is there's no ball production. Last year, Arizona State had 5 interceptions. They need to be able to step it up. We mentioned it with corners. We'll mention it with safety, even a little more emphasis on safety. Because with corner, I'm not too worried about interceptions. I just want lockdown coverage. With safety, I do want some interceptions. I do want guys to have 2 or 3 picks or more than that. You need to have, for me, the majority of your interceptions, I would like to see out of the safety position because there are so many guys who have ball hawking abilities. When you've got that many guys who can intercept the football and potentially turn it into a big play, I am going to have expectations that there's going to be a good amount of interceptions. I won't put a number on it, but if they were unable to generate turnovers, that would be a big time letdown because I just don't see how this defense doesn't turn out and churn out opportunities for turnovers, for big plays, whatever. Sacks, tackles for loss. There's too many players here that if you don't get it, it's a letdown. We can just call it as it is. But the good news is I don't think you're going to get to that point. I think this is pound for pound the best unit defensively. I would put it 1A, 1B with running back. It's as good as it gets. Arizona State has a very good problem to have at the safety position, but I want to know what you guys think of the safety position. Who are you most excited for? Who do you think is the biggest breakout candidate? Let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter, Richie Bradshaw36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils, wherever you're getting your shows. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We will be moving on now that we have concluded our position breakdown series. I've got some more stuff that's cooking up behind the scenes. I'm really excited to share everything with you. So now's never been a better time than to hit like, subscribe. I'll see you next time. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.